We have to change our program.
No,
Yeah, they're live. Yeah, thank you.
love to share your mic.
Okay, I will call to order the ARPA Advisory Committee. We have a quorum today. We've been on a big hiatus as projects have gotten underway. We had allocated all the money. And we are back for an update and just a potential change to one of the allocations. We do need to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which I'm advised was somewhere around March timeframe. Thank you, Supervisor Beatty.
March 17, I believe.
Thank you. And I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, that carries. Thank you. So, Ethan, I'm gonna throw you right under the bus because we didn't really talk about this. Are you able to present this change about the,
Southern Adirondack Child Care Network?
yeah,
Yeah, no
If not-
bus, no
Okay.
to be thrown from.
okay,
Early on in the ARPA process, Lynn Sickles from Southern Adirondack Child Care Network had proposed a project to support in-home daycare providers. She provided a status update in the project probably a year into it. A very thoughtful evaluation of how the program's being, success of it. Gina handed out her project update to everyone at the start of the meeting. It's a brief paragraph, but in a nutshell, there has been interest in this program from residents. The number of people that have actually gotten through the entire training, the pre-permitting, and getting to the step where they're actually ready to open an in-home daycare process. That number hasn't borne out. So we haven't seen as many people actually opening up daycare facilities. So Lynn, being as responsive and mission oriented as she is, has proposed a reallocation of funding. Of the money that she spent, less than $8,000 was used at this point. They've been very strategic in using in-kind alternative grant sources to sort of run their program. Now she is looking at a shared service alliance in which she'd be tapping into a wider network of people working in the field of childcare to support, very much to the same end, supporting the establishment of more daycare. So she is basically in the early stages of this shared service alliance, but in order to move forward, she needs to know if she can reallocate previously awarded funds away from the one that was approved and towards this. Liza and I have both looked at this. We've talked about it. We thought it was fantastic. Lynn has a great track record. It's a not-for-profit that's oriented towards childcare. This was a huge priority area when we did our public survey, when we did the stakeholder engagement early on in the process. Childcare. I can attest to the fact that as a parent of two small daycare age children, a lot of other peers that are in the same situation, like this is a huge issue. Just household cost wise and getting people into the workforce. And for the children themselves. So there you'll have in front of you is a page and a half to outline some of Lynn's thinking on how to get the shared service alliance running. I think it's really great because it leverages existing partners in other counties as well, but she is very deliberate about making sure that the funds would be allocated towards Warren County providers. We internally looked at whether or not we could just, find a way to make the administrative change to our contract. At the recommendation of the county attorney said that we should resolve to reallocate funds if it was the will of this committee. So Liza and I have looked at this pretty extensively. I know that you probably all haven't had a lot of time to look at this. But what we'd like to recommend is that we support Lynn in reallocating her funds away from this in-home support into this shared service alliance. She's been diligent with all of her contract, all of her reporting. She's always ready to answer questions. It's what they do. Southern Adirondack Child Care Network. I didn't see any issues with this proposal. I think, Larry had an opportunity to look at this and, his suggestion was to, do away or amend the resolution that we passed, earlier this year, late last year. And then just resolve to put this money toward a shared service alliance. That was the will of this group. Caveat that Lynn, directed towards Warren County.
It looks like she's only been able to spend somewhere around $7,000 of all that money that we allocated for home-based.
Yeah,
And and it also looks like the Shared Service Alliance does support home-based childcare programs by giving them some sort of assistance, administrative support.
yeah, and there's been, I can't keep track of it all, but there's been a number of different, like state and federal programs supporting daycare providers. I'm not gonna pretend to be knowledgeable about it, but I just know, I've just looked at the news of different programs that come out. And Lynn is aware of these, she's pretty input, so.
Could we amend the existing resolution to include this shared services so that she can still help home-based people who might need, it's a very low cost for helping these people get started.
I'm gonna defer,
Yeah, I think there's two options. I don't know that there's any legal preference between the two. The first would be to amend the original resolution, to bring the number down to some number within the range that this organization believes they will use during the contract term, and leave everything else in place, and just then amend the contract so the number is lower. And that course would then be a new resolution to approve the remaining funding from that reduction for this new use. That would be option one. Option two may just be to amend the original resolution to add this additional use and bases in there. It would still be a new and a separate contract that we would do for this, but that's on our end. So honestly, it doesn't make a difference which way we go, other than maybe for accounting purposes and keeping the different uses separate, but that's for planning, not so much for.
and Gina, you can jump in on this one, but I would prefer the second option. Because the status update that Lynn provided in July indicated that they were going to be directing a couple hours a week of staff time towards this. So if there is any, I don't want to leave her in a lurch where it would be between the time where this committee considers that her proposal and the resolution passes, the contract signed, if they do incur a few hours of staff time into this thing, it would either they have to eat that cost, or we have to go do some fancy paperwork to get that paid in this in between time of the resolution. So expanding the resolution to include the shared service alliance and would in effect not change things, but just make it easier to account for some of the possible putting for previously approved program.
Okay, hold on. Yeah. Go
Doing
ahead.
it as one resolution also would ensure her ability to draw down all the funding, as compared to having two pools where one pool may not get used. So
Yeah.
give her
That's what
access.
I was thinking.
Yeah, so
She could
just
then-
keeping it in one resolution probably would be much more efficient for the organization to draw down the total funding.
Dr. Sieber.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I recall that we had a debate very months ago about whether or not it should be home-based and or center-based. And that this board decided to stick with the home-based versus the center. So I think if you're going to go to that initial rationale of just a singular resolution, it does need to be specific that it's for home-based and center-based, and would include the shared service alliance, because that was definitely a point of not only contention, but one that was very difficult in terms of the center being able to move forward if they were going to apply any of these funds to a center-based versus just the home. And additionally, I know there were some concerns about dollars being spent through ARPA on employment. And I think that was specifically about creating positions versus supporting existing positions. But I just want to be sure that if some of these dollars are going towards a salary or a portion or so many hours, that it seems like you've been able to approve that in the past. But that specifically, this meets the criteria for that, because a lot of the training and the classes that the chairwoman and I both spoke or took, really highlighted to try to avoid as much as possible supplementing salaries, because this money is only a temporary influx. And when it goes away, will they continue to be able to provide those benefits to the Alliance without the ARPA support, without relying on any county direct dollars? Which is, of course, the intent. Before it comes out of your county budget, Mr. Budget Officer.
Ethan, do you have any understanding about whether these funds are used for funding positions at the Southern Adirondack Child Care Network, or do they go fully to the Alliance?
Based on the proposal in front of us, this wasn't for the routine operations of Southern Adirondack Child Care Network. I think it was gonna be, through this alliance, how to support either the in-home or centers in some of these areas of support. So it wasn't like, it wasn't internal to Southern Adirondack Child Care Network, it was external to support the providers.
Supervisor Beatty, you had a question?
Yeah, this is, not on that specific topic, but,
Okay, we can circle back.
okay, good. So Ethan, I'm reading one of the paragraphs that says, we are pursuing funding in all our counties, Warren, Washington, and Hamilton, to be able to have a cohesive regional shared service alliance. So where are they on reaching out to Washington County and Hamilton?
I'm not sure, I can't answer that. But I know that their geography is beyond Warren. And based on what she said here, it was a successful pilot project. So I would imagine if they're gonna go forward with it, it would behoove them to have that participation, and she said she's looking for it. I don't know, I can't speak for her on this one, but I would imagine she'd probably do everything she can to get that funding.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they had earmarked some of their ARPA money towards
That's a
them.
good question. I haven't checked in with Washington County's ARPA funds lately. I know they had invested a lot of capital projects, other stuff that.
Oh, that's right, they did,
Yeah.
yeah, they were, yeah, so I would probably, if I had to guess, I'd say no, because you're right, they did a lot of capital projects over there.
I mean, and circling back, she says that it will be for Warren County providers. The funding is to fund purchase of shared services for Warren County providers. So even if she's partnering with those other counties, you know, the money that we provide is gonna go to our daycares.
Yeah, and then it was great having her. She showed up at so many meetings that she was able to follow our proceedings and understand a lot of the rationale for how we were funding things, so. She's certainly not like an unknown actor in this process.
Yeah, I mean, I feel comfortable amending so that she can use this pot of money for either or kind
Yeah,
of
I
thing.
don't have a problem with it.
If we wanna get more information from her, that's fine too, and we can call another meeting.
I'm good with it.
But I was thinking if we do a resolution to amend, it would say for home care services. As we have it now, and for the Shared Services Alliance to serve home care and or center-based daycares. Do we also want it to say she has, you know, the ability to directly serve daycare centers? Because as Dr. Seaver said, we did kind of exclude that out, but if we do the shared services, I think she's looking to help both home cares and center-based daycares. I think that's okay.
Okay.
I mean, just a question for the county attorney, shouldn't it be consistent? In that resolution to permit both
I
and or?
don't know that you want to necessarily change the scope of the original grant on that micro funding plan.
Okay, so we'll leave that
Certainly can and should have the scope include centers and home-based childcare programs, because that's what the ask is for.
for the Shared Services Alliance funding.
But exactly.
Well, then I would almost say it has to be two separate resolutions, because the first that you're looking at amending is only for homes.
I don't know that it's. difference. That's the.
I thought you just said it's expanding the scope of the intent of the resolution.
We're expanding the scope of the resolution to include the shared services. Alliance.
Which covers both home and
Correct. Which covers both.
both, which is different.
centers and home. But that's going to be a separate contract. Resolution, there's already an existing contract. There'll be a new contract which covers the shared service alliance purpose. But for purposes of a resolution, we just need to have the Board of Supervisors approve a use, which is an eligible use under the Treasury guidelines, which is what we've done throughout. So all we're doing is we're putting two different uses of the funding in one resolution for the same entity. We're saying,
I'm following you, County Attorney. My only question is that if your argument is that it only applies to home base for the resolution, and then you add in this amendment to the contract without, are you saying specifically in the resolution, in the amendment, state that the shared service alliance shall provide services to multiple centers and or home-based childcare? Because the resolution would have to then say that to match the contract, or to your point, you're changing it.
there's an existing contract that's been in place since probably 2022
For home-based,
for home based.
correct?
We're not gonna touch that one.
We're not, all that's happening there is that number is going to come down. Well, it's not even going to come down, it's going to stay the same. We're increasing the scope, meaning they can use any portion of that previously provided funding for this new purpose, which is the Shared Services Alliance. It'll be a new contract. And the scope of that is to use those funds for the Shared Service Alliance for centers or home-based childcare. It's a different,
Do you want to expand it
Yes.
further to say that they could use some of this funding for home-based providers
I'm just trying,
separately from the Shared Services Alliance?
no, they already have authority to do home-based in the original resolution.
They don't have authority though to help.
Centers, that was a
I'm trying to ask, that's
That
what
was
she's
a point
suggesting.
of discussion. My recollection is that was a point of discussion and there was decision not to include that
Right.
in the.
that's not, to be clear to the county attorney, that's not what I'm asking. I think you're misunderstanding it. If your argument is that the home base is the only thing in the resolution right now, and then you're amending a contract that connects to the resolution. The resolution is only authorizing the home base. All I'm simply saying is that to add language into the resolution for the amendment for the shared services, that's multiple centers or home base, so that
Yeah.
you can see it in the resolution. Many times it says, or in a form to be determined by the county attorney. This way, if you're changing it within the resolution, you're being specific to the shared service alliance, that it's not violating the underlying issue of the resolution, which is only home-based.
And I'm not arguing, I'm just not understanding, I guess. There's an established use in the resolution that exists,
For home,
correct? Right, for
Right,
home
for-
based,
for home-based only.
which is a program that's different from the Shared Service Alliance program that's being presented now to the committee, correct?
Yes, and I think the resolution will say we're adding the Shared Services Alliance as an allowed use.
Correct.
And I think it should also say it's for serving home care daycares and center-based daycares.
Right,
Or
The
the
service,
Shared
Yeah, the
Service
intent
Yes,
not to
yes.
hobble the Shared Service Alliance Limited.
correct.
Yeah.
I think we're all on the same page.
I do too.
Yeah,
As long as the resolution states that and then defers to the contract, the new contract.
Of course.
cool. Yeah, it gives it flexibility and won't limit it.
Right. What's done is done. I'm not asking you to go back and change that. It sounds like they had a need. They've now shared with us they had a need, and now we can help.
Mr. Almond, do you have enough in there then for the new contract for the Shared Services Alliance?
Yes,
The dollar amount would be up to the 100 and whatever thousand we allocated, less whatever they spend on the other. You're able to structure something like that?
yes.
Would you like me to make the resolution?
Sure. Yes, please.
I would propose that the resolution of 172 of 2022 specifically be amended to include an contract. And that the resolution specifically state that the resolution is being amended for a contract to be developed for the Shared Service Alliance. That will be able to assist both multiple centers and or home-based childcare programs. And that the contract and the resolution reflect each other, the language.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Beatty. Any further discussion? Questions? Seeing none? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that carries. So that'll go to the full board. If there's anything else that comes up between now and full board, we should be. Yes, Ethan.
There was another question that we had from Shane Irwin. Shane Irwin is working with a variety of the EMS and fire companies each week today. Help them administer the funding that they were awarded for various projects and equipment. Resolution 26, 2023 provided $14,575 to the Bay Ridge Rescue Squad for the eye simulate monitor, which was a piece of hardware that allowed the rescue squad to do simulated calls. So it would walk them through different scenarios, training equipment. Through our quarterly reporting process that we set up, and Gina has been really on it. Mr. Irwin indicated just a week or so ago that the original quote had expired for that training software. And he wanted to determine whether or not he could pursue some PPE for motor vehicle collisions, something that would be worn by first responders, or for a well-equipped golf cart, a special events transporter. Basically get a souped up golf cart or some PPE for motor vehicle accidents. So to reprogram the approximately $14,000 from this iSimulate, training device into this other either PPE or golf cart. My understanding that the way resolution number 26 of 2023 was written, that it was very specific to the iSimulate monitor.
So he's basically changed that whole parameter now
Yeah,
and.
yep,
and
totally
now-
different.
Yeah, so. Wouldn't that have to go through our normal process of? Is he?
Yeah, I mean, it's different. It's different from Lynn's. I mean, Lynn's is basically, the premise there was supporting childcare. This was. We support a variety of different equipment purchases for EMS districts.
Right.
With whatever they generally needed to
Right,
be on better footing for emergency events. And this is what Mr. floated the idea out to us. I said I'd bring it to the attention of people here. It's for everyone's consideration.
Yeah.
I think we all remember the history with one of the EMS districts, and these were his preliminary ideas. I know that they had some other projects funded too. So whatever the will of this group is, I know that we have a resolution in place that takes unallocated money, various things, but this technically isn't unallocated at this point. There's a contract that goes till, for a few years that allows them to pursue this. It's just not viable based on the quotes for the equipment.
so let me ask you this, Ethan, did he tell you how much equipment had gone up? I mean, you're saying he had a price for that equipment, we authorized the dollar amount.
Yep.
To pay for it, now he's saying, well, that contract ran out for that price for that equipment, so my question is. Does he need another $1,000 or something, or?
That's a good question.
Or is that
That's a good
equipment?
question. I mean, he said, once you receive the funds, we found that our quote had expired, and the product increased in price. The new version is not compatible with any of our advanced equipment. So
Oh.
the differential, I'm not sure. That's a good question though.
So the new product doesn't, but Ethan, I think you just read that the new product doesn't even fit his equipment.
Yeah,
So that is it, he doesn't need that equipment at all because it doesn't fit his current.
I mean, yeah, the alternatives that you proposed were some other PPE for motor vehicle crashes.
Yes, so he says, how about this? Okay, all right, I'm just trying to get it clear in my own head here.
So what's Dr. Seaver?
I think that there was a big consensus among ARPA and the board at the time for that initiative because it provided broad training throughout the entire county. And as we had multiple EMSs, multiple fire departments coming in and asking for additional funding, the idea was that this training could benefit all of the municipalities in the city. So I think that if there is a cost factor that he can bring back, and whether it be improving his equipment, maybe it's a purchase of equipment that would be compatible for that need. I recall a lot of departments being excited over it because it was a training and a need that not all the departments were able to access, particularly those in the rural part of our counties. So it would be nice to, if he wanted to bring it back, have it on the agenda, get some information out ahead of time and let us know what exactly the change in the dollar figure would be and what the need is in the county to have that type of training. Maybe it's changed, but I'm hard pressed to believe in the last, month or last year that training needs already dissipated.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. We are in regular coordination with Mr. Irwin.
We can ask Anne Marie too. Right? Okay.
I mean, maybe, sorry, I don't want to
No,
talk
go
out of
ahead.
turn. Thank you. Maybe it's something that the county, even through the county budget process, might have dollars within the EMS budget to be able to, or share equipment, I'm not sure. I'm sure they talk all the time, but maybe there's a way to supplement, within the county structure already as the year comes to a close and looking at those available balances.
Yeah, certainly. I'm not familiar with any of those funds, but
Does that sound like a reasonable approach though, Ethan? Just go back and see if he can give us some more details.
yeah, so the question would be, what was the price increase? Then is there something, some sort of alternative equipment that would benefit other EMS districts for training purposes? So that has a little more impact just outside of the.
Yeah. Is it just the cost increase or is it that they really don't think we need that training anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it's based on the other potential projects on their wish list, with just stuff that was equipment needed by their crews.
Okay,
And so, I mean, really, the request was, can they use the money for this other equipment? I mean, this is sort of a counter proposal from the ARPA committee.
wasn't the iSimulate their original request?
And, there was another company, I believe, that had a mannequin as well, right? That was-
Right,
Same one.
Yeah. So they purchased the mannequin, but the software is not, this software module is a different thing.
okay. I don't feel like we know enough about that to make a change today.
Okay, and that's,
Okay. Are there any other ones popping up like that?
no, I mean, if you want to jump into discussion items.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
just get right to it. I
So-
think that's generally what people are interested in. So just to let everyone know, so Gina's been really doing a phenomenal job. We had set up a reporting system when we were still in the midst of starting to get this money out the door. And the idea was that in addition to reports to the US Treasury, we had to have internal accountability for this money as well. Because we funded not just equipment, but also some programs and other just stuff, right? A lot of grab bag things. Our intent was, we pushed out a lot of this money at the end of last year and the start of this year. That was when we really made a lot of final decisions. There was a bit of time that went with getting contracts organized, making sure we had the right contact information for people, getting everyone to sign the paperwork. get their initial disbursement requests. So over the early stages of 2023, everyone was getting organized. It was really towards the July reporting period, the internal Warren County reporting period, that we had set up, that we had a better understanding of where people were with their projects, right? We sort of figured at this point, people would have their contracts, they'd have already signed their initial disbursement forms, we could start tracking how they were doing. And that took an incredible amount of coordination on Gina's behalf. So in addition to doing our internal reporting, she's been doing US Treasury reporting as well. And then also navigating through our internal audit process as well.
This is great, Gina. This is really helpful. This summary sheet that you provided and the spreadsheet. Awesome to see. We've got 60% of the projects have already received their award. And we've already paid out almost $8 million. It's really great to see that we've got the money out into the community. I know Donna's been doing some PR pieces about the money in different places of the community, so that's nice to see. Hopefully we can do some more of that.
Yeah, so you'll see, there's the one pager that Gina puts together, just sort of snapshot of where we're at with everything. The devils and the details, I wouldn't say the devil, but the interesting part is on the 2-page Excel file that just shows awarded, paid, and used. Used means that they have been able to provide documentation, and we require pretty detailed documentation for audit purposes. We need to track every single cent. The attorney Elman did an excellent job of setting up the contracts that let us enforce the rules that are mandated by the US Treasury. So we have I mean, as far as I can tell, and Gina and I have been talking about this a lot, and we have what we feel is a pretty nice system worked out. Most people are on track. Some people are going slower than others, but as per their contracts, they have some time to get all this sorted out. What we're doing, in addition to getting their quarterly reports, is that, we're reaching out directly to them. It's not, there's a lot of projects, but there's, a handful of them that are larger and more complex. But we do have the ability to, pick up the phone and talk to them. So for the most part, people are doing well with their projects. You'll see some of them have less money in that third column used. For the ones that were pretty low on the used end, that's where we focused our attention on making sure that what are the roadblocks or barriers from this project. I mean, this whole committee decided these be impactful and based on decisions on community input and review of what the academic work. So the green ones, super great on track. The yellow ones are the ones that are just getting started. There were some more complex projects, finding contractors, going through regulations to actually get the money out the door. Things like, Glens Falls Hospital, we had given them a substantial amount of money for their, I think mental health. Yeah. And so we were like, what is going on? They're drawing down a little bit of money here at a time, $1,000. Like, this is classic hospital billing. But then
Sorry.
so they gave us their quarterly report, which we had set up, and it was like, we're just navigating some of the state requirements, and the project's on schedule, and so it was great. So our reporting system worked. Everyone's been a pretty good sport about getting that filled out.
This looks pretty good. I just want to walk through them. Just to stop if there's one you want to ask about. I'm concerned about, this is only a tiny amount of unused, but I'm wondering if it's just not going to be used, the leftover amount for the Crandall Library laptops.
Yeah, that kind of stood out too, in terms of, and this might be a question for just partner shop with, it's like, if these guys have completed the project as outlined in the contract and there's a few $1,000s remaining, what's the process for reclaiming that, getting that check cut back to us? I mean, that's something we can work out.
Okay.
I think that's internal, just getting the money back into the county, and I would ask the committee, I guess, for whether there's a consensus. My understanding is the board approved like a residual funding of Community Services Board, I believe.
Yeah,
I don't have that in front of me. It's just in the back of my mind that we did set up some location for any residual funding to go, so it can be obligated before the deadline.
Yeah, that's great. And that's near the top of this list too. I know that Rob York sent us an update. Do you have that with you by any chance?
Rob's been good about giving us quarterly reports. I did contact Rob on a few projects last week and this week, and those guys are taking a deliberate approach. He doesn't have any issues moving the money. He's worked with all his different service providers. I followed up with him on that final resolution that Larry had mentioned that put money back into homeless and, vulnerable population services. In the same way that he's worked with the Community Services Board, he's worked with a consortium of providers to figure out how to best allocate that funding. He's been good, like Rob understands how to administer grant funding. He keeps a clear line of communication. He knows we have these federal requirements. So he's working through that right now.
He's making progress.
Yeah.
Supervisor Beatty.
Yeah, another item,
Okay.
Habitat for Humanity. If I recall, we gave them $250,000, but
Yep.
wasn't that specifically for a project
Yep.
in Queensbury? It's my understanding that project is stalled.
Yeah, so I did, that was one of those ones that, we looked at this list and say, oh, hey, look at all that money. Here, this was, I think our committee was like housing, right? We want to deal
Right.
with housing, and Habitat provided us with a really good project idea that would provide a path for affordable home ownership for, 20 or 30 some odd units. Their staff person, their director, Adam Feldman, departed the organization in the last few months. He had really been the champion of that project. But I did speak with Mike Dowd, who is he was the board chair for the Habitat for Humanity. He is in the process right now, sort of stepping into the spot of like, hey, I'm on the board, but now I'm helping do some of the work of staff. They're working on rebuilding the organization. And I said, hey, are you guys, you're committed to this project? He said, yes. He said, we're aware of the timelines. We know what our obligations are. We're committed to the project. They're navigating. So basically change in staff. So that's one thing they're navigating. They're navigating land use approvals and time needs very as well. So remain committed to it, in their contract, they have time to do it. The money they have spent on it has been in line with what they said. So we're going to keep in contact with them and make sure that, we're very much interested in making sure that this money, this ARPA allocation is used for housing for county.
At that specific location, which is what,
Yeah, and it's pretty, and that's very clearly outlined in their application. And if they want to substantially change from that, that's where we'd have to,
Come
take a
back.
hard look at the contract and talk to Larry about where we go with it.
okay,
Dr. Seaver.
Thank you. I have just two quick things. One, Ethan, it would be really helpful, I think, if the committee agrees, perhaps to have a update sent to us at whatever time of a new meeting that would show the differential between the awarded and the, what's been paid, what's been used, and what's still outstanding. And I know that part of those after action reports were to include a qualitative aspect. We specifically added a question about how this made an impact in our community and to your agency and the population that you were serving based on the grant award. I'm really interested in seeing that.
Like qualitative stuff.
Yeah, and it would be nice if we could send a letter perhaps to the award recipients stating, here's your time frame. You still have this amount that's unallocated, that you haven't submitted reimbursement requests for, so that they do know, just a gentle reminder that
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
funding is,
Yeah.
I'm sure the,
It's gentle and not as gentle.
right. But something that would also hit on that qualitative aspect for the dollars that they've already used.
Yeah, and it's funny, we have been focused really a lot on the technical and legal side of this. Don Lehman has been spending some energy in getting the success stories out.
Okay.
I'm sure there's probably gonna be an opportunity to like pile all that together and
Right,
bundle up
sure.
this process. We'll be able to put
Yeah.
that together It'll be something,
Okay.
a nice package, right? So we have the hard numbers and we also have the qualitative stuff. Like you said.
Maybe if we could just, get an update on that before an official whatever goes out on it. Saratoga's done a really nice job in some other counties throughout New York State and actually nationally. NACO has those, just looking at their page and all the success stories of ARPA dollars. So maybe trying to get an update on that so that if there are ways that resolutions need to be amended to meet the needs, we could still do that before the allocation expires. But I think that would be a really useful way of still utilizing what's in place of a committee before the end of the year. Recognizing it's not going to happen overnight. But that brings me to my second question, which is in looking at the NACO website, of course, I see that they have, it doesn't appear that they still have a relationship with the National Alliance for Mental Health, which came under the Mental Health Toolkit. I know that Rob York has done a really incredible job with his staff, and we have members in Warren County at the hospital and at the schools, along with Rob York, that have been trained on Train the Trainer for the Mental Health Toolkit. I'm wondering if there's an issue, I'm assuming there's an issue since it says the contract hasn't been signed, with the relationship between NACO and the National Alliance for Mental Health, recognizing that we do have a county mental health awareness month every May. I'm sure we do a lot of hard work. I'm sure you did in May to let our community know about how important mental health is, that perhaps we could take that 65,000 if we are having difficulty getting that signed and ask Rob York to identify those Train the Trainers in Warren County specifically to go out to those schools in the northern parts of the counties and the libraries and provide daycares and provide that Train the Trainer, since that was the intent of that resolution and it's still the same concept as the mental health toolkit. But perhaps our county administrator or our county attorney would want to share with the committee what either the lack of a relationship any longer or just how we can pivot the toolkit to still provide an impact in our community.
Absolutely. We had a lot of discussion at committee meetings this week about mental health problems, especially with our youth. So I think it's really important that we try to pivot and provide this training to our county staff and out in the community, including our schools.
And just to add on to that, Chairwoman, the other night I noticed lots of really positive questions were asked at the Glens Falls Common Council meeting. And one of those presentations was by Ms. Moore, who talked about truancy in all the schools and the connection to mental health. So perhaps pivoting this with the Rob York's organization, who was in full support of this type of training and Train the Trainer, we could bridge that partnership with all of the schools as well as our mental health resources in Warren County and our municipalities to get that training for mental health awareness and those crisis response skills employed within our county instead of just having the money sit there without a contract being signed now for all these months.
Yeah. John, I'm gonna ask you about that in a second, but Ethan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, we that was one of the ones we flagged too in
Yeah.
the quarterly reports. We reached out to Rob and yeah, he's navigating through that process. So he's spent, staff time and
Yeah.
energy getting towards having the contract signed. So he's still, it's still
Yeah.
pursuing that. And like you said, there was the issue of
Right.
profit, who signed what, but he's navigating that. So I would,
Maybe we could give him some authority or some guidance or some flexibility.
yeah, I can certainly make a note to check in with him to see if he needs that, how to be most effective at it.
Can either of you two give an update on the contract issue? If there is an issue?
No, I asked Rob to, thanks, Chairman. I asked Rob to look into it and he hadn't given me any information.
My only ask is if the committee's consensus is that my recommendation is we give them a 30-day deadline to sign and return. And then when it doesn't come back in, we can move forward in any direction the committee would like to at the next meeting.
Okay.
If it's more
Let's
than
give
30
Rob
days.
some time to figure it out, and if we can get that contract signed with the entity that was originally identified. If not, we'll
Mhm.
try to pivot to a different entity or local trainers.
It would be nice if Rob, if in fact you have another meeting before the end of the year, perhaps Rob, we could coordinate that with his schedule so he could have an adequate amount of time to talk about all the projects that are falling within the mental health and community services, which clearly is a lot of, looks like perhaps there could be a lot of unallocated dollars.
I'm hoping that that 171 is just a lag. In their requesting funding and that we're,
Yeah.
they've already are working with the service providers. It was my understanding, these are all providers they work with regularly who are gonna boost their services and add extra things and add help for youth. So
Yeah. the
I'm
lag
hoping
is
there are
back-
not issues there.
Yeah, the lag is generally from the mechanism that we had him establish. It's opposed to going directly to the ARPA committee, it was go through the community services board, so there's just another layer of figuring stuff out that goes into it, but it's my understanding this stuff is all moving forward.
Okay. Well, I think we should have Rob come in and tell us about what's going on. I think that would be really beneficial. Yeah, yes.
Just so that I understand, though, our county attorney alluded to this, and I know we did pass a resolution that said the unallocated dollars would then be dedicated to community services for mental health. But am I to understand that, and Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong, which is why I brought up maybe sending that friendly reminder and that qualitative analysis so we can help adjust some of these dollars. But for instance, it says Warren County administrative costs to improve county resiliency. They paid out 74,000 and were awarded 372,000. If that, I mean, and I'm just picking the first one I'm looking at. Say at the end of the year, 70,000 is unused, or the end of the term of the ARPA dollars when they can be expended. Does that 70, as it would apply to any one of these entities, if there was a dollar amount left over, then automatically revert to the community services committee based on that
was the goal,
resolution?
was to create some bucket. So as we get down to really the last months, weeks and days before the obligation date, we'd have that ability to just roll it over to community services for
Yeah.
that purpose.
But it would not be permitted for it to be transferred into other line items of the county if that resolution is specific that it stays within community services.
It's my recollection. I really haven't looked at it since it passed.
I believe that was it.
Yeah.
So it's so important, and that he'd be able to roll it over.
That would be the plan.
So I think
I
having
think it'll still
Rob
be
here is
subject to
key.
ARPA deadlines, though.
Right. Yeah, so there's a lot of money at stake for mental health and community services where Rob really is a huge key player.
Yeah, you still got 2 years,
I'm sorry, what was the deadline, Frank?
26.
Yeah.
be-
6.
But the obligation
Has to be
deadline,
elevated by-
the obligation deadline is December 31st, 2024, I believe.
Yeah, so obligated, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
there's this brief period that we have for next year. Where there's
Okay.
flexibility, and this is where our checking in with all the recipients.
And at the very end of 12/26, and I almost don't even want to ask this question.
Don't ask.
I know it's not silly or asinine, but my question is, does it go back to the federal government?
Yes.
Okay,
Not a silly or asinine question.
thanks, Chairwoman.
Yeah, that's why we're doing all this. Hence the elaborate spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, and Gina, if I forget to say, could you please add one more column that says amount remaining? Then we can see more clearly, like which ones have funds sitting there.
That says how much they have left.
Yeah. That hasn't been used. Mhm. We asked about that one. Does anybody have any others they want to specifically ask about? I don't see any major red flags, and you guys are gonna tell us if there are any.
Chairwoman.
Frank, your people haven't used their money.
Sorry. I don't know what that means.
Stony Creek EMS still has about 60-some thousand.
So yes,
Started going.
yeah, Stony Creek, they've been very diligent with expending the money and then asking for reimbursement, whereas some have received the check, disbursement check, and then documented how the money was spent. So it's all, yeah, we're working in very close coordination with Stony
Okay,
Creek.
good.
Yeah, we have no concerns. on
Great.
That project.
Chairwoman.
Yes.
There's so many positive examples here. I feel like so many times the county gets dragged down in negative. And, you know, just looking at all the work that's been done over the years, and then also, of course, with the planning department, we had a discussion a long time ago about using our excellent public information officer, Don Lehman, in submitting some of these examples as best practices to both NACO and NISAC. I don't know if any of those have been identified by the planning department or by our county administrator, but I think it's appropriate to ask our county administrator to really dig into this, identify some best practices and nominate Warren County to be considered for those annual awards. They just had their annual conference in July. They have another ledge conference, and then next year they'll look at best practices again. I don't know how the committee feels about it, but wouldn't that be great to be able to highlight some of the, positive examples and impact for our small community here in Warren County at a national level? And I know perhaps that was before you came on, Mr. County Administrator, but could we follow back up on that?
I love that idea. I think we
It-
should definitely, as I've said before, we all worked hard,
Yeah.
put a lot into the process, and we're getting a lot of positive
Okay.
outcomes, and that story should be told.
So I know I don't need that in a form of a resolution, but can we put that as an agenda item for before the close of the year? And we could allot maybe 15 minutes for a county administrator to identify those after talking with staff and the community and looking at that qualitative analysis of the impact of
And I
what we
know
can.
Mr. Lehman has been paying attention and can
Oh,
help
yeah.
us identify some that would be great
Yeah,
to highlight.
let's formally make sure that.
Yeah, I'll
we do
put it
that.
on as a pending item, and we'll meet before the end of the year.
Thanks, Chairwoman.
Thank you. All right. Anything else?
We have been working with J Labs. This one was sort of unique. They've drawn down a small amount of money for the establishment of a childcare center.
That's not the one that was listed in here about how they are creating a new one.
No, this is different.
Okay,
This is just, the realities of buying real estate and all that. That's just something that we're working with, monitoring, but
Is that the one in Queensbury?
it was supposed to be a new one developed in.
Yeah, I think at the old social security building,
yeah.
was that, okay.
Yeah, and we work with Jenna, and I know Jim would work with Jenna. We just want to see that project succeed. So.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just to circle back to the mental health toolkit, perhaps our county administrator could reach out to Matt Chase just to see if you can help Rob York along. Matt Chase was the one who had, of course, recommended that relationship with the National Alliance of Mental Health. And I think before I left back in January, that was one of those things that left undone. But if we're having a problem getting that contract signed, sometimes it just takes that call from our county
Great
administrator
advocate.
to Matt Chase, who of course is from Warren County, and I'm sure
St.
with,
George.
yeah, I think if he's caught off guard with knowing that we have a problem without getting that signed, it might be,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. He could help us or tell us, hey, listen, you gotta move in a different direction than we could. Would that be okay, Mr. County Administrator?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
anything else? Public comment? Motion to adjourn? Thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.